Hi everyone, welcome to We and the Cathy show. I'm your host, Cathy Zhang. Today I will bring you a very special and exclusive interview with Professor Miles Yu, who was the Principal China Policy and the Planning Advisor to former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and now he's a professor of military history and modern China at the Naval Academy in Maryland and a senior fellow at the Hoover Institute, as well as a visiting scholar at the Hoover. Before it's the Hudson Institute, and also a visiting scholar at the Hoover Institution. So he's gonna discuss the current status of the U.S.-China relations. He also addressed the ties between the Biden family and the Chinese government. How does he view that, and more. So please stay with me and to watch this very special interview. So I think you're gonna get a lot of information from that. So before we start, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and click the bell, and also click the like if you do love our shows. So all right, so yeah, and I see a Beaumont Michael's 自由. Wow, you still remember that, the Chinese character I taught you, right? Freedom, 自由. I'm very impressed you still remember. So yeah, I feel so glad. And on the farm, good evening to you, to all. So before we start this topic, I just want to show you a very, brief thing. And let's show this image. This image is, do you know what's that? This exposed the civilian scale by the Chinese Communist Party. And this graph is from New York Times. So this is from one of more than 100,000 Chinese government bidding documents examined by the New York Times that exposed the scale and the scope of the Chinese Communist government's surveillance system. The documents reveal how Chinese policy store over 2.5 billion facial images at any given time, and have sought technology to record audios of people's voice in a 300-foot radius of surveillance cameras. They further show that 25 out of China's 31 provinces and regions have made DNA databases, including by collecting the DNA of individuals who have not been convicted of any crime. The purpose of the technology was, according to one police bidding document, controlling and managing people. And there are also other documents, showing they are actually collecting DNA from the American people, American public. So that's what we are facing, this threat from China. So now let's go to my interview with Miles Yu to talk about this threat we are facing right now. So Miles, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, I wanted to ask Miles, how do you read the current status between the U.S.-China, and what's the most important thing to address for the U.S. in terms of the China policy?
I think with the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, international politics has been reshaped in a way that we have not seen since the end of Cold War. It happened this way. We keep saying that the threat posed by the Chinese Communist Party to the free world is not just a struggle between China and the United States. It's China versus the world. It's really an epic fight between freedom and tyranny. That sounds a little bit too abstract, but with the advent of the war in Ukraine, it became very acute and is very concrete. And that is Russia and China have become very close. And these two countries were very unique in one particular way. That is, those were two remaining civilization states. Now, the concept of civilization states is very important. That is, it is a civilization state basically based its territorial claim of other countries, not on nation state sovereignty. Rather, it focuses on ethnic, linguistic heritage. In other words, if you speak Russian, therefore I own you. And China have the same kind of mentality, right? So those were civilization state. I think, when we say the epic struggle between freedom and tyranny, and we see China and Russia represent tyranny, and the rest of the free world are forming a coalition of freedom. This is important because you see this in the NATO summit. You see this in Americans' new posture in the Indo-Pacific. And so I think the world politics in the last half a year has gone through a dramatic change. And the United States has become more crystal clear on where the U.S.-China relationship stands. And that is, U.S. has formed up its alliances, both in Europe and in Asia. And China has also formed up its alliance with Russia and then other malign actors. And so China said this is a new Cold War, perhaps. But the reason is not because the Western democracies and the Asian democracies want to have a Cold War with China. China itself provoked such a war, and the West has to respond. So, if you claim vast swaths of territories of other countries based upon historical nihilism and ethno-linguistic claims, and then of course democracies have to push back. So that's the reason why I think the U.S.-China relationship is once again at a crossroads, and this crossroads actually, in my view, is a very good one because it crystallizes the demarcation of the two political models of governance, right? China and the democracies.
So, how do you read the current status between the U.S. As you mentioned, in general terms, both the Republicans, Democrat parties in the United States have realized the greatest threat is the Chinese Communist government, the party. However, just in terms of policy and the strategy, what do you think needs to be done in face of such type of threat?
That's a very good question. I mean, one of the things that you see that actually happening all across the globe is to reshuffling of alliances, right? NATO is expanding because Russia is invading a sovereign country. China say Russia, good job. So you see countries like Sweden and Finland. I mean, Sweden is a country with more than 200 years of neutrality, right? So they give up neutrality to join the collective mutual defense alliance called NATO. So that's pretty historic, right? In Asia Pacific, it's the same thing. You see the formation of alliance. Quad is important, but we have now gone beyond Quad. We're talking about Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, and many other democracies, right? So, and they're linking up with NATO. So you see the formation of a global alliance. I call it North Atlantic Indo-Pacific Treaty Organization, NIPTO. So I think that's very real. It's within reach now. That's very concrete. With this being said, and you can see something even more concrete, that is the impetus to push back against China's expansion has become much more robust. China wants to have a security pact with South Pacific Islands, for example. The West reacted very, very strongly, and we have that squelched. And the United States has strengthened its diplomatic, military, and economic presence in the South Pacific, along with our friends and allies in that region, most prominently Australia and New Zealand. So I think those specific events triggered by the war in Ukraine uh, uh, have crystallized the, the formation of different alliances over there. So I think that's pretty good for the world because it casts away a lot of illusions and indolence and hesitancy become very clear where each country stands.
So one thing many people are concerned about is how the Chinese Communist Party corrupt and sometimes collude with, for example, the relationship between the Biden family and the Chinese government, as well as some other establishments or elites with the Chinese Communist Party. So people are wondering if the Biden administration can be as forceful as necessary when dealing with the Chinese Communist government. So Miles, how do you see that?
I think this actually is a very positive development because we're now super vigilant about China's infiltration of American ruling elite. And China has an elite capture approach, mostly through United Front, right, 统战. And that has been very, very effective over the decades. It not only affected Americans' federal level policy formulation, but also has fundamentally impacted the subnational level in the United States. The states, the local governments are also affected by that through Confucius Institutes and a lot of subnational economic engagements. And they all have political strings attached to that. So I think, the talk about Biden family's tie with China, obviously there are opportunities, hopefully in the near future, to sort it through, to become more transparent. And I think, right now it's just speculation, right? But we also have another way of doing this. American political process is very complicated. And so all the issues will be clarified or cleared up one way or another through legal or congressional processes, right? Hearings and court filings. And I think this is a good thing. On the details of the Biden family's connection with China, I'm not going to be commented in detail because I do believe in the near future things will become clear.
Yeah, and that reminds us of that National Security Council a few days ago gave notice to the local and the state government officials, as well as to businesses, to remind them that the Chinese Communist government is trying to collude and corrupt them.
It all started with one very important speech given by Secretary Pompeo in February 2020. And I was involved in drafting that speech. And I think, he spoke at the National Governors Association in Washington, D.C. I was there as he delivered the speech. And he sent a very strong warnings to our nation's governors about China's infiltration and at the subnational levels. I think a lot of governors took notice of that, and we get a lot of feedback from them afterwards. Right now, obviously, it's not only become a policy issue; it has become a law enforcement issue. Right, the Justice Department is actively pursuing suspicious cases through the legal process of the United States. I think that's very good. I mean, I think as long as the world take notice, and I think Chinese Communist Party's march into Western democracy probably is not going to be as roseate as they expect.
So let's switch to China. For China to have a positive change, many people believe that the most essential factor or the things to happen is for the Chinese people to rise up. And according to Miles, your knowledge about the situation in China, what would you like to tell our audience? Okay, so that's something I want to show you, but Mao Yu will talk about what this is about. This is the Chinese national anthem by the Communist Party, and he referred to that.
The first line of the Chinese national anthem, the March of Volunteers, 义勇军进行曲, goes like this: Arise, those who refuse to be slaves. 起来，不愿做奴隶的人们. That line has to be sung repeatedly because that's what's ultimately matters, right? I think right now there is a prevailing thinking. I think is misguided. That is, as long as the Chinese top leadership make some changes, and Xi Jinping steps down, some other reformers show up, and to lead the nation, things will get better. That's not going to happen because remember, before Xi Jinping took over, he was regarded as a reformer, and he was considered as a better alternative to Hu Jintao. When Hu Jintao took over CCP, he was considered as a better alternative to the very stubborn and ideologically stringent Jiang Zemin. Before Jiang Zemin took over, he was considered as a better alternative to the butcher of Tiananmen, Deng Xiaoping. And Deng Xiaoping came to power, and he was considered as the great hope of China, a very benign alternative to Mao Zedong, right? So it goes on and on. Mao Zedong was considered as a better alternative to Chiang Kai-shek in 1940s. So this is all illusions. I mean, this is all China's problem is the very political and ideological system, communist China, communism. Unless you have a systemic institutional change, there will be no real future for the Chinese people. So that's why. I think the ultimate impetus for change in China not comes from above, atop, but from the bottom. That's people's power. That's why the slaves the Chinese people who refuse to be slaves should rise, just as Chinese national anthem says.
Yeah, and I just want to make a note. The previous clip that we showed to you, people are chanting the PRC's national anthem, was from the people the depositors. Remember the depositors to the Hunan village banks. When they were protesting, they were singing this. And ironically, Chinese Communist government always want them to sing that to support the Chinese Communist government's ruling. But now this time, people are singing that to go against its ruling. So then, this July marks the brutal persecution of the spiritual practice of Falun Gong in China. As a matter of fact, today in Washington, D.C., in front of the Capitol Hills and the lawns, and Falun Gong practitioners from all around the United States did a demonstration. Again, it's an annual appeal to the general public, to Washington, is to help stop the persecution of Falun Gong in China. So, Miles, what do you think the impact of this?
I think this is, China's brutal crackdown and continuous suppression against Falun Gong is a very emblematic of China's political repression as a whole. So Falun Gong obviously is the obvious victim of Chinese dictatorship. But you can see, there's also the Uyghurs. There's also religious practitioners of all kinds. So China's repression is total and holistic. So that's why I think, in post-communist China, the first thing that Chinese people should do is to set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to figure out who was responsible for all these crimes and genocide under communist regime. This is very important for people, for a nation, because you need accountability. You need to hold those people responsible, and that's what happened in South Africa. That's what happened in most countries in Eastern Europe before those countries march into future prosperity and democracy, because you have to really reconcile what happened decades ago under this brutal dictatorship. One of the first things, the first step of Taiwanese democracy is to have a national reconciliation of what happened on 28th of February 1947 at the Erba, right? So a country cannot become healthy unless those injustice is corrected. So I think the continual repression of Falun Gong is one of the first things that people should take action to redress in a post-communist China.
And recently, the Hudson Institute in Washington, D.C. established a new China Center, and Miles, you as the senior fellow there, is leading the center. So what can you tell us about this initiative?
Well, China Center is set up under Hudson and to do a number of things, right? One of the most important things that we try to do is to provide a unique policy voice and to basically, strengthen the existing policy consensus across the nation in the United States on China, on CCP. So, and this consensus is nonpartisan and also bipartisan at the same time, because both Democrats and Republicans, liberal and conservatives, or anywhere in between, they all reach near national consensus on the nature and the danger of Communist Party to this democracy and to the world peace. So that is very, very rare in U.S. history. I mean, the United States is basically a 50-50 country, right? Everything is divided right in the middle. But on China is near 100%. And so this is one of the things that the China Center is trying to do. Of course, we have another initiatives and projects, and I'd rather just not say much at this point because we just started. And I think it's a great project, and I'm honored and very delighted to be able to direct such a great institute.
All right, so that's Mao Yu, the former, chief China policy advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. So, and we all understand that during the Trump administration and under Mike Pompeo's lead, with Professor Mao Yu's advice, the U.S.-China policy had a very sharp turn, and which also just people will see how much of a legacy it has left. It has been impacting what is going on right now and will be going on between the U.S., China, and also the world. So I think a lot of people are looking forward to this China Center, newly established by the Hudson Institute, and what it will do, and what kind of the impact it will have to the United States in terms of how to deal with the CCP's threat. So what do you think? Do you have any thoughts after watching his interview, and do you have any questions or thoughts on what he thought, what he said? So would love to see your comments there. All right, so in terms of let me see, book said ironic for now, and on the farm say yes, the lyrics are ironic, and book said, oh, the awakening is happening. Yes, so we can just watch that clip again if we can, how the protesters are singing the national anthem of the PRC. But this lyric really shows how the Chinese Communist Party really deceived Chinese people to support them in 1949 to take over the power. And they are saying, oh, stand up, those people who don't want to be enslaved anymore. In fact, the Chinese Communist Party has been enslaving the Chinese people for the past 7 decades. But now, indeed, with all the things happening, with the lockdown, with the zero COVID policy, with the meltdown of the real estate market and the financial institution, as well as how the women were just chained, the chained women in China. All these things have been waking people up in China. However, one thing that I wanted to point out, if you remember the clip that we show you when people are protesting, the depositors protesting in front of the Hunan banks, some of them are still showing like the PRC's flag, because in their mind it represents China, but in fact it represents the Chinese Communist Party's ruling. So people in China, because they are so much brainwashed, on one hand, some people are awakening, they are rising up. On the other hand, a lot of their concepts, their way of thinking are still very much under the Chinese Communist Party's control. It takes time, but I think overall, we do see some kind of awakening in China, which is a positive development. So, you said, I like Mr. Yu's seeming optimism. Yes, that's also my impression of Professor Miles Yu. He's a very positive person. And I think it's a good thing, especially under the current climate, and a lot of distressing things are happening. But his optimism does not come from nowhere. From my conversation with him, so I think he does bring a positive kind of impression to people and give people some hope. He did a very wonderful, excellent speech in Bay Area, talking about the relationship and the future of the interaction between Taiwan, U.S., and China, which and he answered a lot of questions. So it was, I learned a lot from that speech. It is in Chinese, though. We'll see in the future, maybe we can share some of the contents. But overall, he's a very positive person. He knows a lot about China. He knows a lot about United States and the geopolitical, situation. But I think we do need some positivity, right? And book, you said, I agree, it's very good to find good outcomes from these troubles. That's a good business practice. Indeed, I think, we should keep positive. There is hope. And the main thing that the authoritarian regimes like the CCP, what they want the most is for people in the free world. For example, in the United States, people lose hope for their future, lose hope about the system, right? The system is not perfect. However, we have a way to improve that. But the most important thing is people get engaged. People still, have the positive, outlook, positive attitude, no matter what's happening. Think about the Falun Gong practitioners in China and around the world in facing of this 23 years of oppression. They are so calm, but so persistent, right? And so this, I think, actually what's really giving people a lot of people hope. And on the other hand, we shared with you about the Shen Yun performance, which showcased the classical dance and music from China, which is actually, without any cultural boundary. Many of them, the dancers, the artists, they do practice the meditation of Falun Gong, and it gives people such a positive energy. And a lot of people, especially after this pandemic, they watched the Shen Yun show and they just saw so much energy, and so much hope to their life. So I think it is, having a lot of impact. So, yeah, thank you, Booker. Your comments. Yes, engagement and persistence, indeed. Okay, let's take a look at on Safe Chat. Our friends on Safe Chat, Judy. Judy, you said we are living in a scary and evil time. I think you are referring to the picture that I showed you, book like our latecomers, like book. You missed that, but you can go back to watch that very short presentation of this picture shows the scale of the CCP civilians. Okay, and Alan said, thank you for all your share. Thank you. You're welcome. Michelle, thank you for sharing. Yes, thank you for your comments letting me know. All right. So I think that's it for today. I'm glad that you like this interview, or you have other thoughts. You're all welcome to share that. So, all right. Booker you said thank you, Cathy, and all the crew there. Outstanding programming. Wow, thank you. And on behalf of our crew, we really appreciate you stay with us. Learn about what we have to share with you, and hopefully it really brings you some value. And if you do like it, please remember to click the like and share the video with your friends. All right, take care and good night. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.